Hi, pastors. This is Barry Davis with the Pastor's Helper. I want to ask you a simple question today, and that is, what are you preaching on this weekend? I'm going to ask you to share the answer to that question in the comments. So, what is the title of your sermon? What is the text that you are preaching on? Sometimes I think it's helpful and encouraging to other pastors to see what other ministers might be presenting to their particular congregations or group. And then I've got a second part to that question, and that is, what is your dominant thought? You know, when we prepare sermons, it's really helpful if we have a dominant thought, or you might call it a purpose statement or a central theme for your sermon. I like the idea of, or the term dominant thought the best. And the idea is, I'm going to study the text that I'm preaching, and then I want to boil down into one sentence what the main theme or what the main thought is of what I want to get across to the congregation that particular week. And then I build the sermon based on that dominant thought. All of my points, if I'm preaching deductively, which is what I mainly do, what I'm going to base my points upon that thought. So we're going to take an easy one. Let's say I'm preaching on John 3:16. And we all know that text. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. And so I study that, and I come up with this dominant thought. And the dominant thought is, God loves us, and he has proved his love to us. So that's my dominant thought. So now I'm going to build my sermon based upon that dominant thought. I want every point to reflect that thought. So the truth of the matter is, I could have 1 or 4 or 10 points to a sermon, though I don't recommend 10 points. But I could have as many points as I want to that sermon, but every one of them are going to reflect off of and prove whatever that dominant thought happens to be. So, again, my dominant thought is, God loves us and he has proven his love to us. And so I'm going to look at that passage again. And again, I've gotten the dominant thought from the passage, so I'm not trying to manipulate the passage to fit my dominant thought. My dominant thought has come from the passage, but this is going to help me to build up my sermon. And so, how has God proven his love to us? Well, he sent his only Son for us. He, secondly, made a way for us to be in a relationship with him. He said, whosoever believeth in him. He promised us that we wouldn't perish. And then he also promised us everlasting life. So I have a 3 or 4 point sermon, depending on how you want to do this, based simply on that dominant thought in this passage. For God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. So my points might be, God gave us his Son. God gave us a way to salvation. God has promised us to be with him forever. And all 3 of those reflect back to that dominant thought. So what's your dominant thought for your sermon this weekend? We'd ask you to share, what are you preaching on, and what is the dominant thought behind your sermon? Thanks for listening and being a part of the Pastor's Helper.